Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, KeyShot Tips and Tricks to Optimize Your Workflow. And today we have Saskia Failla from KeyShot who will be presenting, and we also have my dear co-worker Martin Haglund who will be my co-host today, and I will be your technical support in the background. Now I will hand over to my co-worker Martin.
Hello everyone, I was just going to present PDS vision in the big picture, not just as Luxion and KeyShot focused. PDS vision, we have the headquarters in Stockholm and also operating in 13 countries right now. We have one of the largest partners to PTC, Platinum, worldwide. We also have a big growing partner for ANSYS and also one of the biggest partners to KeyShot as well, since we are based all around the globe. And more than those apps, we also do our own apps to increase the value of the investment and make it a better transformation. And here are some of the customers using our software. As you can see, there are many different areas they are being used in, such as automotive, medical, high-tech, and industrial machinery. And maybe there are some logos you recognize from here. And KeyShot is currently used in by engineers and designers in more than 180 countries. 60% of the Fortune 500 companies are using KeyShot as well. And also more than 200 prestigious design schools worldwide are using the software right now. And these numbers are always growing, and they're trying to get into new markets and more companies using, and see how fantastic it can be when you know how to use it. And also here are some of the companies that are using KeyShot, like Under Armour, Sonos, Fossil, Motorola, Unilever. So also big and small, high-tech, big machinery, food industry, so watch industry, and all in between. So yeah, these are some basic info. Now I'm handing over to Saskia that we are with us today from Luxion and KeyShot.
Thank you very much. Just let me share my screen. Great, you should be able to see my screen. So yeah, hello and welcome also from my side to this webinar. I'm really looking forward to present you a few tips and tricks about KeyShot today, of course. Just a quick introduction about myself. I am Saskia Failla, and I'm working as a creative specialist for Luxion. And my daily business is to create renderings, animations, KeyShot web configurations, KeyVR scenes, or even AR files for augmented reality as demo scenes for different industries. But now let's get started. First things first, I just want to mention that this will not show a complete workflow, but rather some things that you as a beginner may not have noticed yet. And I will cover such topics like materials, for example, what you can do to get a more realistic metal, lighting setups, and how you can set up your lighting a little bit more easier, cameras and render settings. So there will be a tip for almost every area inside of KeyShot. So now I will jump directly to KeyShot. The first thing I want to mention is a little bit more, I would say, technical. So something what you can do before you even start to materialize your object, or even what you can do after you already did that, because you already edited maybe your beautiful KeyShot scenes and do not want to put all that working time there again. This is a specifically great thing if you want to use your geometry for different purposes, which are not necessarily related to renderings or animations, but more for things like the KeyShot Web Viewer, augmented reality, or even KeyVR. For that, it is very important that you work with a low triangle count if your goal is that type of product presentation. You can lower your triangle count directly in the import dialog of KeyShot in the geometry tab down here. This only works if you are working with files that just contain NURBS data, for example, your Creo files or step files, etc. In this example, I am working with a step file, which I downloaded from GradCred for free. So here you can see the tessellation quality, which you can directly lower to 0.001 and then click import. You will notice that there are way less polygons than before. But in that case, where already an edited geometry is inside of KeyShot, you can simply choose to update your geometry here and click on import. This will take into account the work that you already put into your file. So just let KeyShot update it. This will take a second. It depends a little bit on how big your geometry is. So you will see the poly count here in the heads-up display. For the purposes I mentioned, there is, I would say, one rule: as few triangles as possible and as many as really are necessary. So now you can see the triangle count changed from nearly 700,000 to this, so around 80,000. And this is way better for the performance for the purposes I mentioned before. By the way, if you cannot see the heads-up display, you can use the shortcut H on your keyboard to show or hide this overview again. This is, by the way, also very important for one of the last tips in the webinar, so stay tuned. Other important shortcuts are, for example, Z for your coordinate system down here, or you can even press K if you want an overview of all of your shortcuts in KeyShot. You can even change them if you go to Edit, Preferences, and your hotkeys, so you can change them to your own personal preferences. But now let's switch to, I would say, the most fun part of KeyShot: change and edit the materials. Sometimes you do have a lot of duplicates in your scene. For example, you can see here that the screws, for example, do not contain a material. If they have the same material after you imported it, you can check it directly here. You can type that specific part of the name directly in the search bar here. For example, here, screw. And KeyShot automatically filters all objects that contain this one in its name. And now it's way easier to simply drag and drop a material out of your library to this list here, and you can see that it changed this on all objects that were selected. Just going to do that again with this part here, select it and type in just a part of it and do it the same way. Now you can see that it has a nice metal look in that case. So, and after that, you can of course still change the material, since the materials are now linked on all those different objects, and this will make it definitely way more faster to materialize your whole scene, especially if there are a lot of duplicates in there. Also regarding to shortcuts is that you can use Shift plus your left mouse button to copy a material and Shift plus your right mouse button to paste the material on another object. This will make your workflow a lot faster. Just try it out, believe me. Great. So another thing that relates a little bit to materials and also the lighting setup is that you maybe need some round edges. For example, you can see that there are a lot of hard edges in this geometry. And if you change it to rounded edges, it will look a little bit more realistic, because most of the parts you see in real life have some kind of rounded edges, sometimes just very, very slightly, but that makes it also very easier for us to touch it without getting cut. You can round your whole geometry if you select the main group, or you can choose a specific part of your geometry where you want to have rounded edges. After that, you can scroll down here in the properties and change it to whatever you want. For example, in this case, I'm going to type in 0.5, and you should notice that it looks a little bit more realistic right now. Of course, it is possible that there are some parts that still may need a sharp edge, or maybe something that it's a little bit less rounded than before. Then you can still select the single geometry in that case and change the radius to 0, or a just 0.1 or something like that, so that the edge in that case reflects the light a little bit more realistic. Now I want to show something that is maybe a little bit more advanced in the material. One thing you can do to get a more realistic result is to work with a roughness map. You do not see them in the textures tab down here, but you can see it next to the roughness here on this little icon here. If it looks like this, you can see that there isn't any texture currently, but you can right-click on it and add any texture you want to have in that case. Additionally, you can do the same in the material graph, which I'm going to show you, but it's definitely the same result the other way. So I'm just going to add the granite texture in this case and put it to the roughness of the metal. Just going to zoom in a little bit if you're working with a smaller screen. So, okay. Since I talked a little bit about shortcuts before, I want to mention that you can preview this specific texture in the material graph if you select it and hit C on your keyboard. For me, personally, this is the most important shortcut inside of the material graph if you're working with it. And now you get the preview of this texture where you can see changes better. For example, like if you change the scale or something else, or even the color, which I will change here to white. If you now press Z again to switch it off, you can see the result of your whole material again. And now you may notice that there are some varying roughnesses on the object. By changing the color again of the granite texture, so maybe a gray or something like that, you can adjust it so it's a little bit more rough or a little bit more glossy. But in general, I just want to mention that you can get very creative with all the types of different procedural textures inside of KeyShot if you think a little bit outside of the box. For example, the textures have a specific name, like leather, or granite, or marble, or something like that. But of course, you can use them for other purposes as well. So I prepared some examples. Let me switch to PowerPoint. For example, here you can see a great example with the texture wood, where it was used to just change the bump of a metal to achieve this anisotropy look. In this case, the texture granite wasn't used to showcase a stone material or something, but it was used for the roughness of the metal, just like I showed you before inside of KeyShot. This one maybe is a little bit more advanced if you want to use a utility node, specifically here color to number. In this case, you can manipulate the brightness and the threshold of this texture. In this case, it's granite again, to get a more realistic look. I mean, it depends a little bit on what you want to achieve, but in reality, just very few surfaces are perfectly clean and polished. So in general, I would like to bring your attention to perfect imperfections, like we all see them in reality every single day. So why do a perfect clean rendering? I just want you to invite you to try different things with different textures. Another great example is that you can use the material, real cloth, not only for apparel, but also for 3D weaving other types of materials like plastic, paint, metal, etc. For that case, it's just important that you put the real cloth material node to the geometry material output, whereas you put your chosen material type, like in this case, metal, to the surface of the material. After that, you simply need to change the display setting of real cloth to 3D ply geometry, and you can play around with different weaving patterns to receive different results, like you can see here. And of course, you are still able to change material properties like the roughness of the metal, and can even add a roughness map or a bump map or something else to it. So just be creative. So now I will switch back to KeyShot. Besides of procedural textures and materials, I want to mention one thing that is super helpful if you want to change a label with, for example, your logo or something else. Maybe you were already in the situation that you positioned, for example, your PNG with the transparency somewhere on your model and noticed that you need to change it. Maybe you need the logo in another color, or there was a typo, or just something else that went wrong. So you need to change that. Before you now drag and drop the correct texture as a label into the file, you can simply replace it. If you go to the Labels tab, select this one, use the path, and click with your right mouse button here and choose Replace and Retain Size. Now you can select the right texture you want to import, click on Open, and it will be replaced in the exact same position with the same settings. And it is definitely way more easier to do it in that way than to drag and drop the texture here again and try manually to get the right position here. So now I will switch to the Camera tab, because I want to show you how you can easily create standard views, so like front or back or something, with scripting. But do not worry, we do not write a Python script right now, but there are already some scripts in KeyShot which you can use. For that, I'm going to click in the scripting console here, and I'm specifically referring to the script create standard views. So I select this one and hit run, and KeyShot automatically will create all the standard views as cameras for you. You can see that the script was successful here. After that, I click OK and close the window, and I can switch between all those different cameras back and forth. Of course, you can still change some of them if you wanted. Another thing about cameras I want to mention is that you can direct the viewer's gaze. I like to refer to it like you choose the main character of the rendering. We all see that there's always something a little bit blurry to the edge of our focus point of where we are currently looking at. And we can add this in KeyShot by simply creating a new camera. We'll do that in that case here. And scroll down to the depth of field option here. Now I can select the crosshair and select where exactly I want the focus to be. Maybe it's a little bit too blurry right now, but that doesn't matter because I can adjust it by changing the value of the f-stop. So just like I want it in that case. After that, I can save the new camera with depth of field and can still change to the other cameras where you can see that the depth of field option isn't enabled. So now let's switch to the lighting setups. You may already know that there are two ways to work with light. The HDRI environment, like for example here, and physical lighting. This trick now is something about physical lighting, and I personally recommend to use the geometry view for this one. I recommend this because lighting usually depends on the perspective from which you are looking at your geometry. And in your geometry view, you can freely rotate your camera, change the position of the object or something like that without changing the view in the real-time view itself. So since I'm talking about physical lights, I'm going to add an area light in this case. After you add your physical light, like I did in this case, you can bring it to the position you want to have directly in the geometry view by using the move tool here and just rotate it or translate it to the position you prefer. And you can see directly the light information here in the real-time view. So now another thing is that if you duplicate this one, which you can, by the way, do with Control W, or simply by clicking with the right mouse button and use duplicate, you can select it in the geometry view as well. Use the move tool again, and now to make your life a little bit more easier, you can change the pivot object of it. So for that case, I'm going to use the crosshair again. And in that case, I'm going to select the main group of the whole object, but you of course can also select only one object you want as your pivot object now. After that, I click OK, and you will notice that you now can rotate your area light way easier around your object. And this is very helpful, for example, if you want to set up a 3-point lighting setup or something like that in a easier and faster way. Even you can even do this if you want to make some simple animations and you need to change the pivot point of a specific object as well. Also, by the way, if you can see your area light here and you do not want to see the geometry of the area light, but still need the light information inside of KeyShot, you can double click on it and disable visible to camera. So you won't see the geometry, but still get the light information on your object and into your scene. Also, that's very helpful so that you cannot see the geometry of your physical light in your rendering, of course. Last but not least, I want to show you how you can find out what amount of samples you need for your rendering. I often got this question in the past where people ask if there is a general amount of samples they can use, and unfortunately there is not. It's nearly the same like with the poly count, or the triangles count, sorry. The rule is as few as possible and as many as necessary. So it depends a lot on what materials you are using, your lighting setup, your settings here in the lighting tab, and much, much more. And the goal is to get the right amount of samples so that your rendering does not look noisy or unfinished. For that, we need the heads-up display again. And additionally, we can use the region render tool, which we can, for example, scale down and position it to one part of your real-time view where it still looks very noisy, which is usually in shadow areas or very dark parts of your scene. This, by the way, works for CPU or even with your graphic card, but please be aware that you need a different amount of samples. It depends on what system you are rendering on. So if you need 400 samples for your graphic card, you may not need that many on your CPU. But if you choose your region rendering, you can have a look at the heads-up display and watch at how many samples it looks great and less noisy for you. That then is the amount you can use for your final rendering. So just switch region rendering off again, switch to your render settings, to the options, and you can type in the samples you found out were perfect for your rendering. Also, if you notice that you need a lot of samples and maybe do not have the strongest render machine, it is also recommended to use send to network if you have network rendering as well. In that case, you can choose how many cores or graphic cards of other computers will work on your rendering so that you can still work on your KeyShot file or something else without your computer slowing down through the render process. So this will make it way faster to achieve your final rendering. So in that case, I hope that I was able to present you a few helpful tips and tricks for you, and that you can now optimize your workflow. And of course, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Saskia, for the nice tips and tricks here. I see we have some questions already that had come in, but I want to start because I have one. So I was wondering, can you change the tessellation quality of individual parts, or is it just the whole?
Yes, you can do that as well. You can do that in the tools. Should I share my screen again for that? Okay, here it is. Yes, you can do this as well. So for example, in that case, you can select one geometry where you want to change the tessellation again, switch to the tools, and you can work with the retessellation tool. So if you notice that you still have too much triangles in your scene, you can still reduce the triangle count after importing it with 0.001.
Yeah, perfect. And also, I can see we have one question here, and it's wondering, does it work for SolidWorks files?
Yes, should work for that as well, yeah.
Yeah. And also I have another question coming in here. Is adjusting radius available in bundled version of KeyShot in Solid Edge?
Sorry, I think I didn't understand it acoustically.
Is adjusting radius available in bundled version of KeyShot in Solid Edge?
Oh, I'm actually not 100% sure about that, but I think so. It should be available there as well.
Yeah, we can double check it and come back in this case. And also, what is the difference between maximum samples and custom control?
Yeah, you can see that here in the render option that you can choose your maximum samples here, or custom control, where you of course also type in your samples. The difference is that if you work with custom control, it doesn't matter what settings you set up in the lighting tab. So your render quality depends only on the settings you set up here.
Okay. And also another one coming in here about the text on the part. So it's the logo kind, I think. If I do not have a text on it, or if I did write a text on the part in the 3D, can I make a text in KeyShot?
So like type in a text or something like that? No, that's unfortunately not possible. Not yet.
Okay.
Maybe in the future.
Just adding pictures, or so you say.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Currently, it's limited to that. So if you want to add a label with a warning text or something like that, you need to do that in another software or prepare it there and import it via PNG or JPEG or another image texture.
Yeah. And if I add the labels on my geometry, it also appears on the other side of geometry. How can I prevent this?
Mm-hmm. I often got this question. So for example, it would be like that. I already changed that here. So, but now you can see this is the default setting of your labels. If you add something like that, you simply just need to change the depth of the label itself to a higher value than 0, like 1 millimeter or 5 or something like that. This really depends on your geometry. But if it's set to 0, it will be projected through the whole geometry infinitely.
Okay, yeah. That's all the questions we have coming in here. Do you have any more questions from the ones participating? If not, I want to thank both all the participants and also Saskia for doing this nice presentation and webinar with us. And
you're welcome.
And also on the screen here, you see my contact details. So we will come back on the question we couldn't answer right away. And also, if you have questions coming up during the day, during the week, or any other questions about KeyShot, PDS Vision, you have my contact details here, and just call me or send me an email, and we have a nice chat. And also, the webinar will be available for on-demand purposes.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for participating today, and have an awesome day. Bye.
Have a nice day. Bye.